Welcome to the Burrow. It's your host, Lala Bunny. And the topic of today's video is an important part of stock market history, the Piggly Wiggly short squeeze. Now, before we start, we need to establish a bit of financial education for those who may not know what a short squeeze is. It will help you understand this story. So, what is shorting? When someone borrows a stock, sells it, and then repurchases it ideally at a lower price. So the short wants to buy the stock back at a lower price. Occasionally, the stock will shoot up and the short will only be able to cover their short by buying that stock back at a higher price. That means they basically made a losing bet, and that is called a short squeeze when the price just shoots up. The shorts, they're also called bears. They often target companies that are in decline. A short squeeze occurs when there's so much increased interest in the stock that new buyers enter the market and the price shoots up. Notable short squeezes in stock market history include Volkswagen, Herbalife, and Tesla. Now back to Piggly Wiggly, let's get into it. Who? Clarence Saunders, owner of supermarket chain Piggly Wiggly. What? Educated a short squeeze of his own company's stock, which ultimately led to his financial ruin because Wall Street regulators rigged the game in their favor. Where? Well, the grocery chain was headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, but Saunders traveled to New York City when he had to purchase the stocks and execute his plan. Now, Saunders was born in Virginia in 1881. The grocery chain Piggly Wiggly was founded in 1919. It became publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange in 1922. In March of 1923, that was when this whole short squeeze went down. When Saunders called for the return of his shares, the bears were forced to return their borrowed stock and buy them back at the price set by Saunders. Traditionally, they had 24 hours to comply, and they had to locate these shares, which I believe at the time were like physical certificates. They had to find them. And unfortunately, fortunately for the Wall Street insiders, but unfortunate for Mr. Saunders, the bears received an unfair extension that bankrupted Mr. Saunders. His plan succeeded, but then failed because Wall Street changed the rules. This is notable because Piggly Wiggly was the first modern grocery chain. Saunders invented the self-serve checkout lane. And the way that it was done in the old days was that the shopper would hand a list to the grocery store clerk. And then the clerk would go fetch your items and bring them back. So then the shopper was just standing around waiting. And now the shoppers get to browse the aisles for all the products and then bring them up to the front of the store. That's the system we still have today. So Clarence Saunders was responsible for revolutionizing the modern supermarket, to create what we have today. He also patented the grocery store receipt, and still to this day, customers do like getting a physical receipt when they leave the store. Now, by changing the way we shop, Saunders also stimulated the advertising industry because companies attempted to make their products stand out more on the shelves, and then they released newspaper ads, which eventually became television ads. So by changing the way we shop, he also kind of spurred this huge advertising agency, because now instead of just handing a list of like, oh, I want eggs and cheese and whatever at the grocery store, now the customer was the one perusing the aisles and choosing. Why would they choose one item over another? Advertising. So Piggly Wiggly was so successful at first that Saunders purchased a 160-acre plot of land outside Memphis. He started building a marble mansion called the Pink Palace. The plans for the extravagant mansion included a waterfall, a bowling alley, and an 18-hole golf course. Okay, why did the short squeeze occur? So In 1921, the Piggly Wiggly chain had expanded to include 615 stores in 200 cities and 40 states, so it went nationwide. By 1923, there were about 1,200 stores, and half were owned by the company, and roughly the other half were owned by franchises. Now, some of the franchises failed in the North, especially in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and Wall Street caught wind of this. Now, Wall Street traders spread negative rumors about the company. They attempted a bear raid where the shorts gang up to bankrupt a company. Clarence Saunders was not having that. He made and executed a plan to catch the shorts and force them to cover their positions by purchasing his stock back at a higher price. How? Well, how did he go about it? He took out a loan for 10 million. In today's dollars, that would be equivalent to over 150 million. He attempted to corner the market. He traveled from New York. He traveled to New York on a train from Memphis with 4 armed guards and a suitcase filled with $1 million. He enlisted the infamous trader Jesse Livermore to help enact his plan. They assembled a team of brokers to carry out a massive buying campaign. By 1923, he controlled over 99% of Piggly Wiggly stock. He had over 198,000 shares out of 200,000 available or outstanding. He owned the float and was ready to squeeze the short sellers. He also started a crowdfunding campaign as a contingency plan. He offered to sell 50,000 of his shares, valued at around $70 at that time, at a reduced price of $55 for the public. And they could buy these shares on an installment plan. Now, this was critical for the short squeeze to work. Saunders had to ensure that they didn't sell immediately. He included a clause that the shareholder would not fully own the shares and therefore could not sell until December 1923, 9 months down the line. And he placed a newspaper ad in order to accomplish this plan and sell these shares to the public. What was the outcome? Well, at first, the price went up from $40 to $120. The plan appeared to have worked. And then Wall Street cheated. They allowed the shorts more time to deliver their borrowed stock. The Wall Street Stock Exchange governors took the stock off the board. Trading was suspended. There was no marketplace for Saunders to be able to unload his stock and realize his tens of $millions in gains. Saunders owed his creditors millions because the stock became nearly worthless. His victory was stolen. He had outsmarted Wall Street with pure gumption, and he was cheated out of a fortune. Note, the SEC regulatory agency, short for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, would not be created until 1934, a decade later. Now, what happened to Clarence Saunders? The Pink Palace mansion that he was building, he had to sell it, and it became Memphis's first museum in 1930. And he also founded another chain of stores after he went bankrupt called Clarence Saunders stores. But unfortunately, when the Great Depression hit, those stores also went under. So he lost his fortune again. Interesting. In the late 1920s, Saunders owned a professional football team called the Tigers. So, I mean, we've got Wall Street history, football history, and supermarket history. This is a very fascinating tale. The Tigers played against the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears. In 1929, they beat the Packers 20-6. In 1930, the team was invited to join the NFL, but Saunders refused. He did not want to travel far distances for the away games. He might have missed an opportunity there. Now, in summation, Saunders was a pioneer of grocery technology. His life's work included making grocery stores more efficient. And for context, the shopping cart was not introduced until 1937 and patented until the 1940s. And it was not even widely adopted until a decade later. Before the cart that we know, like the metal cart on wheels, before that, customers had to carry baskets. And as you know, when you fill that basket up with canned goods and it gets really heavy, the basket limits your ability on how much you can fit in it and the weight of items you could purchase at a time. So the cart came later, but before the cart, people used baskets, and brought their items up to the cashier. So, Piggly Wiggly, Saunders also introduced the first modern day electric turnstiles. So, if you're not familiar with what a turnstile is, you have to walk through it, and it's similar to what we have today on the subway, the MTA in New York City. He introduced this in 1916. And here is where it gets even more incredible. In 1936, Saunders formed another store called Cadoozle. And it was a grocery store vending machine. It was basically a prototype of an automated store. This genius idea was light years ahead of its time. Now, how Cadoozle worked? Well, it didn't work that well. The idea was great. The execution was difficult. So shoppers would view items through glass display cases. They would insert a key into a slot under each product they wanted to purchase. The key would punch in a pattern on ticker tape attached to the keys. Cashiers then inserted tape into a reader to send signals to a conveyor belt, which would then bring the items to the checkout. It was not fully mechanized. It still required human grocery store stockers to load the items behind the scenes. And it had many technological issues and mishaps, so it did not make as much money as Saunders thought it could. Now, with modern technology, it could have worked. So this store, Cadoozle, was discontinued in 1949. But Saunders kept working up until his death in 1953. He had a project called Food Electric. This was the predecessor to today's self-checkout kiosks. In his model, the customer would slip a small device, which Saunders referred to as a computer, into a slot. The price would register on the computer, and the item would slide down a chute. When the customer reached the checkout line, all individual items were already rung up. The customer would pay the total and pack their items and leave. The store never opened. This personal device or remote, described by Saunders as a shopping brain, is like a handheld computer. Clarence Saunders anticipated the advent of the iPhone well before Steve Jobs was even born. He was a genius and a visionary. The process he described could be executed today with the use of a smartphone. In fact, Amazon has tried this. Amazon Go and Amazon Fresh stores pioneered a cashierless technology called Just Walk Out, where customers could ring up their own items. However, the store recently closed down because, in spite of modern technological innovations, customers are not ready to embrace and adopt this type of shopping experience. Other chains are attempting this with devices such as, there's also smart carts that read the item when you put it in the cart, or smart shelving that detects when you remove the item from the shelf. But this still has not been mastered to this day, and the public is slow to adopt these new technologies when it comes to impacting their in-person shopping experience. However, it is fascinating that when you do check out online, you add your item into your cart, and there's a little icon that's a shopping cart. So, where am I at? Let me scroll back down. In conclusion, Clarence Saunders was an innovator. He revolutionized grocery stores and took on Wall Street. His legacy still goes on at the Piggly Wiggly. Okay, his legacy lives on at the Marble Pink Palace Museum in Tennessee, as well as the modern grocery store that we have today. Although I haven't mentioned GameStop so far in this video, the Piggly Wiggly saga mirrors the GameStop short squeeze of 2021. GameStop is what got me interested in the stock market. The Piggly Wiggly saga caught my attention because it was yet another example that reveals how the game is rigged. The individual retail trader is like David, and Wall Street hedge funds are like Goliath. Clarence Saunders had many resources at his disposal and still lost the game, albeit unfairly so. His story is a lesson that deserves a place in stock market history. And this is Lala Bunny signing off. That was the Piggly Wiggly saga short squeeze. And happy trading.